The Philippine economic growth slows down in the second quarter of 2018, according to the report of the National Economic Development Authority. Ray Pelayo tells us why.
Despite the increase in prices of commodities, the Philippine economy grew 6% in gross domestic product or GDP in the second quarter of this year. The performance puts the country in third spot among the countries in Asia, following Vietnam and China. But according to the National Economic and Development Authority or NEDA, the Philippine economy slowed down due to some policy decisions like the Boracay closure last April.
For the first quarter, tourist arrivals increased by 14%. Second quarter, tourist arrivals increased by 5%. So lumaki yung drop, but it's still positive.
There are also multiplier effects of the impact of the closure of Boracay, not just on the economy of that island itself, but it also has other effects.
Philippine Statistics Authority Undersecretary Lisa Grace Bersales also says that the agriculture performance also contributed to the economic slowdown.
Na yung ating palay farmers, usually nag-harvest sila ng second quarter. Ang ginawa nila, nag-harvest na pala sila sa first quarter. Kaya ang performance nila na-capture sa first quarter economic growth.
The official adds that mining companies' control over the metal productions like nickel is also a factor. Tobacco consumption also decreased due to the effect of sin tax law. Though the country's economic growth is still looking sound, Bersales says it will take time for the common citizens to feel its impact.
So ano mga sektor ang apektado? Yung agriculture sector, yung mga Boracay area for tourists, doon yung mararamdaman nila talaga na nag-slow down.
Malacanang meanwhile remains unperturbed over the fall in the GDP growth. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says this rate is still high, reiterating that the administration's policy does not only rely on economic and financial aspects.
The president, of course, will exercise the powers of the state known as police powers to protect also the environment, and he has given a further priority, higher priority to the protection of the environment, and he makes no apologies for it. If GDP will further fall because of the desire of the president to protect the environment, so be it. We're investing in the future and not just in the present.
Ray Pelayo, UNTV, News and Rescue, Philippines.
The Senate still refuses to rush deliberations on the proposed federal charter despite calls from the lower house to fast-track discussions. Here's why from Nel Maribohok.
The Senate remains resolute against expediting discussions on the proposed federal charter. According to Senate Committee on Constitutional Amendments Chairman Francis Pangilinan, several questions are needed to be addressed in the campaign for charter change. These include the warnings of the Duterte administration's economic managers on the possible threats of federalism on the country's economy.
Hindi biro itong usapin ng charter change na dapat magkaroon na ng charter change. Dahil baka ang maging resulta nito ay man-made calamity na both political and economic disaster.
At the Senate hearing on Wednesday, Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez cited the possible fiscal risk of implementing the proposed federal charter. He said the investment-grade credit ratings, which allow the country to borrow money with lower interest rates, will go to hell if the proposed shift to a federal government pushes through.
What are we talking about?
A very large deficit.
Right?
Yes.
So what would happen to our credit rating?
Oh, it will go to hell.
While according to the National Economic Development Authority, a total of 120 billion pesos is needed by the government to make the shift. Due to the issues raised, senators urge for more serious discussions on the matter.
Bakit hindi na lang after May 2019 na bumuo ng isang ng CONCON para magkaroon ng separate na halalan para mabusisi ng husto ang revision ng ating saligang batas?
Until now, senators have yet to decide on how to amend or revise the Constitution despite its progress in the lower chamber. Nel Maribohok, UNTV News and Rescue, Senate of the Philippines.
The Duterte administration remains determined to push for federalism in the country. This is despite the statements of the economic managers that the economy may suffer if we shift to federalism, such as higher interest rates, source of payment for national debt, among others. Malacanang says solutions should be laid out to prevent it from happening.
A solution so that we can make the change to federal form of government without having to experience the downside of the change of government as envisioned by the economic managers.
Malacanang ensures that the whole cabinet of President Duterte still supports federalism. However, there should be answers for questions and apprehensions of economic managers on the draft proposal of consultative committee for the charter change.
The president would have to task them because the president, as the principal of all the alter egos of the president, has said that he is pushing for federalism. So it is incumbent upon the alter egos to find ways and means now to make that happen.
Several lawmakers are questioning the Department of Budget and Management's proposal to use a cash-based budgeting system for 2019 proposed national budget. Grace Casin tells us why.
The House of Representatives is preparing to pass a resolution seeking to withdraw the earlier support for the budget reform bill and the implementation of cash-based budgeting system in 2019. This is following the budget cuts in all government agencies for next year. Appropriations Committee Chairman Carlo Nograles says the proposed budgeting system also slashed their district's budget, prompting opposition from congressmen.
Ayaw namin ng cash-based budgeting, gusto namin ibalik sa obligation-based. So because we changed the premise, babalik namin sa DBM. Tapos sabihin namin sa DBM, okay, ngayon na hindi na tayo cash-based at hindi kami papayag sa cash-based, obligation-based na po tayo, paano itong mga na-cut ninyo dahil cash-based? So babalik namin sa DBM ang problema.
Under the cash-based budget system, agencies are required to spend allotted funds and deliver their project within the year regardless of possible setback. It replaces the current obligation-based budget system where agencies may spend on various projects even without available funds, but they are assured of reimbursement the following year. But Public Works and Highway Secretary Mark Villar still defends the administration's proposed system, despite their 93 billion peso budget slash.
The only difference is the amount will not be reflected on the whole amount of the project will not be reflected on that year, in that 1 year. It will be spread out between the 2 or 3 years that it's being implemented.
77 billion pesos was also slashed from the Department of Education, 35 billion pesos from DOH, and 5 billion pesos each from COMELEC and DSWD. These budget cuts were transferred to fund the salaries and pension payment for police and military. Nograles says this new system may cause a delay in the proposed budget passage or worst, might even lead to a reenactment budget. A possibility that Albay Representative Edsel Lagman agrees with.
The reenacted budget would be better than the present proposed budget of DBM.
Congressman Nograles is set to meet with the DBM to discuss the concerns. Grace Casin, UNTV, News and Rescue, House of Representatives.
President Rodrigo Duterte will meet with the members of his political party, PDP Laban. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque says the president wants to unify the two warring factions led by the party's current president, Senator Coco Pimentel, and lawyer Rogelio Garcia, who is a former classmate of Duterte.
He wants to unify the party, and he will clarify that he remains chairman of the party.
A consumer group conducted a price monitoring in Metro Manila and found out that several stores are non-compliant with the expanded suggested retail price of some products as prescribed by the Department of Trade and Industry. Mon Hokson will tell us why.
A consumer group monitored that some products in retail stores are 50 centavos to 1 peso and 50 centavos higher than other brands. According to Laban Consumer Group, the items they checked are considered overpriced based on the suggested retail price of the Department of Trade and Industry.
It appears parang useless yung expanded SRP kung ang presyo naman sa supermarket, grocery, lalo na po yung sardinas, mataas, no, sa expanded SRP.
Dimagiba said that the Trade Department must act immediately to help consumers on the increasing prices of basic commodities. Dimagiba suggests that the DTI must implement a moratorium on price hike application until the first quarter of 2019. Discourage consumers to buy Easy Open Lead canned goods because its price is 50 centavos higher than the usual brands. Implement the provision in the Tax Reform Law Package 1 that gives 10% discount on NFA rice to 50% of the population of poor Filipinos. And strict monitoring of prices of basic necessities and prime commodities in the whole country. On the other hand, DTI officials also conducted a price monitoring inspection in supermarkets. But in their monitoring, supermarkets are compliant with the expanded SRP. DTI said if there are products that increase their price, consumers can still avail some products which is lower in cost. The Trade Department advised consumers to not even bother if there is a brand or two that increase price because there are more choices in the market.
Look at the shelf, ang daming naglalaban na brand dyan. So, competition nandyan eh. So, takot lahat. Even yung SRP natin, kung titingnan mo yung range niya, may 12 pesos. So, makakapili yung kung ano yung mura, 12 pesos, 13 pesos. May 16.75 din. May, premium. Oo, may premium din, no? So, may choice si consumer.
Meanwhile, DTI launched the new consumer care hotline 1DTI or 1384. This is the number that consumers can call for any complaints and questions about the product they bought. 1384 is toll-free for all consumers around the country. Mon Hokson, UNTV News and Rescue, Mandaluyong City.
The Bureau of Customs confiscates over 39 million pesos worth of sugar that were found in 45 abandoned 20-footer containers at the Port of Manila. The shipment, consigned to Red Star Rising Corporation, arrived from Thailand on separate dates in June and July. It was declared to contain packaging materials, kitchen utensils, and craft paper. But customs operatives found over 22,000 sacks of sugar inside the containers upon inspection.
While this particular shipment was still in transit, I have already instructed the district collector to put the containers on hold and issue the necessary alert order.
The BOC immediately revoked the accreditation of its importer for violating the Customs Modernization and Tariff Act and the Joint Memorandum on Securing Import Permit from the Sugar Regulatory Administration.
Due to our heightened drive against all forms of fraud committed against the Bureau of Customs, you know it's very difficult to pass through our stringent processes. Perhaps this is why the importer did not file an entry and chose to abandon the shipment, violating the period lapse.
The Metro Manila Development Authority will push through with its policy banning provincial buses along EDSA beginning August 15. But instead of a total ban, they will only be prohibited from entering EDSA during rush hour. Joanne Nano tells us why.
The Metropolitan Manila Development Authority conducted an inspection earlier in Valenzuela Interim Terminal. This is to check if the terminal is ready for the supposed transfer of around 300 provincial buses. During the inspection, along with the LTFRB and Valenzuela City officials, the MMDA found that some facilities there are yet to be completed. This include the designation of lanes for provincial and city buses and the segregation of jeepneys, buses, and UV Express vans that will also be accommodated in the terminal. Because of this, the MMDA decided to postpone the supposed implementation of total ban of provincial buses in EDSA on August 15. Instead, provincial buses will only be banned from plying the major road during rush hour. Under the policy, all provincial buses are prohibited to traverse along EDSA Cubao to Magallanes from 7 to 10 in the morning and 6 to 9 in the evening. Violators will be penalized with 2,000 pesos.
Yung dinayran natin na pag ang bus galing sa north hanggang Cubao lang sila, pag galing south hanggang Pasay.
The Provincial Bus Operators Association has previously voiced opposition to the policy, but they admit that they can do nothing if the MMDA will implement it. The MMDA has directed the Valenzuela City government to fast-track the completion of the interim terminal within a month.
Give us a little bit more time, hindi naman matagal na matagal, para maiayos lang yung terminal condition at saka yung mga sasalo ng mga vehicles.
The MMDA also targets to open the Santa Rosa interim terminal in Laguna by year-end. Joanano, UNTV News and Rescue, Valenzuela City.
Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara orders the Office of the Government Corporate Counsel to prove the contract that led to the recent firing of the Board of Directors and Management of the Nayong Filipino Foundation. Mai Bermudez tells us why.
The Department of Justice has ordered the Office of the Corporate Government Counsel to review the lease contract entered into by the Nayong Filipino Foundation Incorporated with developer Landing Resorts Philippines Development Corporation. This is following President Rodrigo Duterte's decision to sack the Board of Directors and Management of the NPFI over what he described as a flawed and grossly disadvantageous 70-year contract over a government property. Justice Secretary Menardo Guevara has tasked the OGCC to review all documents pertaining to the transaction in question and to submit a report with recommendations on the proper course of action. Under the lease contract, the LRPDC will develop a $1.5 billion casino resort in the Nayong Filipino property in Parañaque City. A distant relative of the president, Maria Fema Duterte, has accused her fellow NPFI board members of corruption over the said contract. She alleged in her filed complaint that the government stands to lose 25 billion pesos in 50 years due to the transaction. But amid all these, the DOJ says the project's implementation will still continue. Changes will only happen once the evaluation is concluded and new NPFI board members are elected. Meanwhile, Malacanang stands firm on the possible nullification of the questioned lease contract, following reports that the sacking of NPF executives will not affect the project.
So when the President says it is flawed, then obviously the order to review is towards possibly putting an end to the contract.
Mai Bermudez, UNTV News and Rescue, Manila.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to visit the Philippines by year-end in the latest sign of improved relations between the two sides. Malacanang says President Xi's visit will happen after the APEC summit in Papua New Guinea in November. But prior to his visit, a deal on the proposed joint exploration in the West Philippine Sea may possibly be forged. This is after Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano confirmed that President Rodrigo Duterte has approved the creation of a group that will study the proposal. The palace also expects Xi to visit Davao City, the hometown of President Duterte.
So he was looking forward to visiting the Philippines. And I remember in China, the President even invited him not just to come to the Philippines, but to come to his house and have dinner in his house in Davao.
The Philippine Long Distance Telephone Incorporated and NutriAsia blame the existing laws as root of issue on regularization of workers. According to Senate Committee on Labor Chairman Joel Villanueva, it is high time to push for the passage of an anti-endo measure. Nel Maribuhok will tell us why.
The officials of the Department of Labor and Employment, the Philippine Long Distance Telephone Incorporated, NutriAsia and union workers attended the hearing in the Senate on the issue of contractualization. Until now, there are no assurance if the 7,000 PLDT workers will be retained in their jobs amid the call of regularization based on DOLE's order. The two companies blame the ambiguity of the current laws, which is the root on the issues regarding contractualization.
But I also understand that in my interpretation of the law, which may need clarification, we are allowed to outsource to call centers and business process outsourcing.
Makakabigay liwanag po yan kung anong po kailangan nating maybe amend or improve sa labor code.
But for the Labor Department, this is just a scapegoat of the companies.
Huwag na po natin pagsamantalahan ang kakulangan sa batas.
Because of the issue on labor code, Senator Villanueva will ask President Duterte to certify the anti-endo bill as an urgent measure.
Klaro na mayroong pang-aabuso na nangyayari. Klaro na may problema yung tungkol sa ambiguidad ng ating mga patakaran, protocols.
Last Monday, the anti-endo bill was sponsored in the Senate plenary. Under the said proposal, labor-only contracting will be strictly prohibited with corresponding penalties. There will also be a clear-cut classification of regular and probationary employees and a measure that provides for a security of tenure to all kinds of employees. Nel Maribuhok, UNTV News and Rescue, Senate of the Philippines.
PLDT contractual workers requested for a dialogue with Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello III this afternoon to ask for DOLE's next measures on the decision of the Court of Appeals in favor of PLDT's motion that not all workers can be regularized. Here's Aiko Miguel to tell us why.
Workers have gathered at 2 in the afternoon today in front of the Department of Labor and Employment's office in Intramuros, Manila. They are requesting for a dialogue with Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello III and are seeking help regarding the Court of Appeals decision in favor of PLDT. The workers feel insulted as DOLE's order to PLDT to regularize workers had been rendered void by the Appellate Court. They want to hear DOLE's next measures to reverse CA's decision. According to the president of the Manggagawa sa Komunikasyon ng Pilipinas, it seems like the CA have not reviewed the new order on regularization under the Duterte administration well. MKP adds that the 47-page decision issued by the CA is clear that contractualization still exists as there are jobs which cannot be regularized by companies.
Imagine, sa decision na yon, more than 7,300 lives again questionable, mabubuhay ba sila ng tama sa susunod o hindi. Kaya kami nandito ngayon para hingin yung patuloy na suporta ng ahensyang ito. Sana wag silang manawa katulad namin. Sana patuloy nilang i-uphold yung pagtulong dito sa mga taong ito. Dahil kung hindi mangyayari ito, hindi ko alam yung kinabukasan natin.
CA voided DOLE's order to regularize jobs in the IT firms and services, IT support services, business process outsourcing or call centers, and even janitorial, messengerial, and clerical services. The group wants to clarify what measures could still be done to protect the rights of the more than 7,000 PLDT contractual workers who are currently jobless.
Itatanong na rin natin kung ang Department of Labor na nasa ilalim ng opisina ng Pangulo ng Pilipinas ay hindi sinusunod, saan pa kami kukuha ng kaayusan? Upang itanong, ano ang posibleng gawin ng Department of Labor? Meron na kami. Automatic magpapile kami ng motion for reconsideration sa Court of Appeals.
To date, the PLDT workers are still waiting for DOLE's response as to when dialogue with the labor chief will be set. The contractual workers from Palea and NutriAsia are scheduled to have a dialogue with Secretary Bello today to tackle their concerns on their regularization. Aiko Miguel, UNTV News and Rescue, Manila.